Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Spark Faith Podcast. I am Dr. Chris Sargent, and I have another doctor with me. She is a doctor of, in her own right, in pastoral counseling. Okay, so don't get tuned out there. She also has her first degree and first love is nutrition. So she has a bachelor's in nutrition. She has a master's in divinity and a doctoral in pastoral counseling. She is a wealth of knowledge and so super humble. She's unbelievable. She's written 3 books. Hello, people, 3 books, 2 children's books and a devotional, which we're going to get into and talk about today. And we both have this incredible love for nutrition and helping people move into healthier spaces. So welcome, Dr. Kim Grom. I'm so excited to have you on here. It's so awesome. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. And I am excited as well. And I have looked over Simply Functional Medicine, which I got on Amazon by Dr. Chris Sargent.
Thank you.
Yeah, a little bit about you as well.
We're reading each other's stuff. That's awesome. It makes it even better. So, Kim, tell us a little bit about where you started, because you also created an incredible ministry called Revelation Generation. You had your own nonprofit bookstore called Life Connections. I'm reading your bio. It was a bookstore, it was a cafe, it was a counseling center. You had internships for women coming out of faith-based rehab. Like, you've spoken all over the place. I mean, come on. So tell us how this whole thing got started. Tell us a little bit about your story. How did you end up with Revelation Generation, and then just move on?
Wow. Well, the story began, my academics were in nutrition were because my father at a midlife thought that he was type 2. It turned out he might have been type 1 his whole life, undiagnosed.
Oh, wow.
It put our entire family into quite a stressful mode when I was a teenager. And I thought, well, I don't know anything about food and nutrition, but this seems to be a big focus in my family right now. And it just propelled me into studying that at Montclair and getting a bachelor's. I can't tell you back at that time that I learned all so much about nutrition. I took a lot of chemistry and science. But the way the field has developed now, modern day, is incredible. There's so much more out there that I think I was a little ahead of my time, and I've had to catch up a little bit with today's world. So that was that. But as far as developing the ministries, that started because I had developed late stage Lyme disease back in, and I have written about this testimony many times. I've been interviewed about it, but I was a woman with 3 small children under the age of 5 who could not get out of bed, could not function, was having neurological issues, and had no idea what was going on with me. So years later, quite a few years later, Lyme disease was in the forefront, and there were billboards where I lived. And the area I lived in, Western New Jersey, was a farm community. And so there were many, many deer, many ticks. But throughout that, I received a personal, I call it a miraculous healing, because it was not in agreement. What happened to me was not in agreement with what the doctors thought was going to happen to me. And yet today, I am not in a wheelchair. That was spoken over me. I have no loss of function. I can walk, do things, swim, horseback ride, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's my personal testimony of, how I became involved in health and personal health, because I had some struggles, but also how I became involved in faith, because it was the support of a faith-based community and the people in that community that were instrumental in praying for me, supporting me, and really helping me to believe that this thing could be overcome. And so it was. And I have a friend, some friends that are very strong in their faith. They say, well, there is nothing stronger than your faith. And that's tough to grasp, but I do believe that there's a lot of weight to that comment. There is nothing stronger than our faith.
Oh, bingo,
Yeah.
bingo. So
Yeah.
did you also use some of your nutrition knowledge to help yourself get well?
You
Because I
know,
know
no,
when
I
was all that Lyme stuff for you? Around what years? Because I know I had a whole rash of patients with Lyme
that
at
was in
one
the
point.
early 90s. That was
Yeah,
in the
those.
early 90s. Yeah. And
Yeah.
um, I don't know whether they just discovered it, or there's that book Plum Island, which talks about how it was actually released from that government island, and the deer swam over directly to Lyme, Connecticut, and that's where it was first apprehended. But yeah, it was all of a sudden, it was like, we've tested you and this is what you have. And no one had really ever heard much about it before. Somewhat debilitating, but I feel like I had nutrition under my belt for quite a while. Pardon me, in terms of, healthy eating, at least what I knew. There's so much more now. But I could not, no, I could not wrap anything I knew around this, because the symptoms were so strange, really
Yeah, they
strange.
are.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, they are. So you just bathed yourself in prayer then. And this
we
was,
we were just listening to the doctors, finding out as much as we could. My poor husband, if you can imagine being told, well, you have 3 small children under the age of 5, and your wife will probably end up in a wheelchair. Horrifying for him, gee,
yeah.
just what I thought was going to happen with our life. But,
Wow.
but it
Okay.
didn't.
Well, we just started the podcast with a miracle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's amazing. I didn't know that part of your story until right now. So I'm like, whoa,
Yeah,
dumbfounded.
that's how we got involved with faith-based groups, and we began to do Bible studies together. I mean, my husband and I were in a denomination growing up where wasn't a lot of focus on the Word of God. Not that it wasn't good, but we had more to learn, and we didn't know it, because we like many people backslid, and we poo-pooed religion. We said, oh, we don't need that, we've done that, our parents dragged us there, we're over it. But that's not how it worked out for us. Yeah, at all. That's not how it worked out.
When God wants us, he grabs us, right? Whether we like it or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you don't mind me saying, we went through a series of other misfortunes. They actually came in threes. We had put a deposit on a home. We were a young couple. There was some clause in the contract that we didn't pick up on, and it allowed the builder to retain our deposit, which,
Oh.
we ended up, that was a mess. So we had a financial blow. We had the Lyme disease, a health blow. And then, unfortunately, I lost a child in the process. My second child passed away. And so we had
Mm.
that. And my husband and I used to say to ourselves, God must really hate us, because why is all this happening to us? But when you said, when he really wants you, he wants you. And my neighbor next door was a woman of faith, and she was going to Bible studies, and she was my friend, and she kept saying, you need to come to Bible study, you need to come to Bible study. And I kept saying, I don't want to do that, I don't need that, I've had enough of that. And there came a point in what was going on with us that I started thinking, maybe I really do need some support, you know? And so, long story short, I decided to go.
Even
Um,
though you're mad at God, right? Like you're
well,
probably some things happened in my world. I was mad at God for quite some time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we do that. We look up. I mean, I remember looking up and saying, what did I ever do to deserve all these blows, And I didn't realize that I didn't have an umbrella of protection over me, because I really was not walking in faith. I really was not walking with the Lord. I didn't realize I was fair game for the assault of the enemy. I thought that was pretty much mythological stuff, angels and devils and this and that and the next thing. But as I said, there were a lot of things that I hadn't looked at because I really didn't know much about the Word of God.
True. And I think that he allows things to happen to us for us,
Mm-hmm.
right? For us. He doesn't create things that happen to us to make us victims of those things, but for us to get closer to him, to have some lessons that he wants to learn so that we can show up on the other side completely different in his glory.
Yes, yeah, we go through the process.
It
Yes.
is the process. I was actually just reading about that this morning and meditating on that as I was walking the dog and listening to a particular podcast this morning. And I was thinking, like, okay, the process is this day in and day out and day in and day out to bridge this gap of where we are and where we want to be, right? Because where we want to be is different. Like God wants us over here, but we're here and we have to go through these things in order to get here. And we come out on this other side a completely different person.
It's true. And you
Mhm.
sometimes you say, really, God?
I
And
know, for sure.
that you end up doing, and you think, I really didn't want to do this, but there wasn't a way to go around it. And I'm doing it. And that's when I say, really, God? And it's like at this point, it's like Abba Father. I imagine he smiles and says, yes, I gotcha. You can trust me. It takes a long time, at least it did for me, to be able to know that Abba Father has me and he's got me. I can't say I always felt that way, but started
Yeah.
to more and more trust him,
I
Yeah.
think that's so beautiful and such a great lesson for y'all out there, our audience. Like, just really understanding that gap is going to be completely anything that happens in the gap from where you are to where you're going to be is going to be uncomfortable. But God, right? And I
Right.
imagine I just had this visual of, they have these big, huge, I wouldn't even know where, maybe in a jungle somewhere, right? Like, but these big, huge mountainous ravines, right? And they have these little bridges that are made of like rope and like little slats. But God is those little slats along the way. Like you're barely holding on to this rope thing and it's swinging kind of all over the place and
Uh-huh.
all of that. But God's still there. Like every step, he's there, he's there, he's there, he's there, he's there, even though you're swinging in the breeze, right?
I gotcha on that. Now, you reminded me of a fabulous um, teaching. When I went to Regent University for my master's, we all had to go down for cohorts. It was 2/3 online, 1/3 in person. So one young gal got up, African American lady, was from the Virginia Beach area, and she preached. We all had to preach our little sermons. And to this day, what you were saying about going across a little bridge, she gave a preaching where she said, on one side of your face, where you blink yourself like a horse, is the rock. And on the other side of your face is the hard place. And God is the rock and the hard place. And you have no choice but to go forward. And you just reminded me of that. It was such a well done sermon, that of course I haven't forgotten it in many years, but you're right. That's how we go, one foot in front of the other.
Oh my gosh, I love rock in a hard place, right? And
Yes,
the
and
fact
hard
that
place.
most of it, right, most of our rock and hard place, most of our gap is what happens between our ears.
Yeah,
It's this
absolutely.
mindset. It's the yes, I can. Yes, we can. Actually, we can do the uncomfortable things. We can go through the uncomfortable conversations, the uncomfortable steps to get from an unsuccessful business to a more successful business. We can go through the uncomfortable steps of being 20 to 100 or more pounds overweight to being into the normal weight range. We can go through that uncomfortable time of from sugar addiction to sugar control, right? We can do that from craving to control.
Yeah.
But it's right here, right?
Most of the time, yeah. And I remember apprehending the emotional context, and it was hard, of reaching for carbs and sugar. I remember the day that something stressful hit me. It was a conversation, and it made me uncomfortable within a close, familiar context, with those that the best. But the conversation, for whatever reason, created stress. And my immediate response was, I need to eat a cracker. I need to eat a cookie. And I thought, there it is. When the Lord says, take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Now, Christ didn't say you can't have a carb. That's not the obedience necessarily, but it's capturing the thought. And then, wanting to take care, as you say, Dr. Chris, of your temple. And I remember apprehending that, and I thought, aha, I am an emotional eater, but if you had told me you might be an emotional eater, I might have thought, well, what does that mean? That I'm an emotional eater, that I cry and then I eat, or I laugh and then I eat? What does that mean? But it wasn't until I recognized the trigger.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
there's a trigger in there. And then, of course, with a counseling background, that kind of prompts a little bit of self-seeking for the individual who wants to overcome.
has to.
You have to get in there and start looking at the dirty laundry, or whatever you want to call it, the baggage, and say, hey, where did that come from? And like you said, be willing to look at it, the hard stuff.
Yeah, it's so important. And capturing those thoughts that are our triggers, or understanding as you open the door, or the door to the cabinet, or the door of the pantry, or wherever that food is, right? Refrigerator, freezer, whatever. Like, okay, I'm here, I'm seeing what I'm doing. What just happened?
Yeah.
What just happened? And if in that moment you can just back away, it doesn't mean you can't have whatever you went after, right? Like if you are going after those Oreos, like it doesn't mean you can't have those, but just stop for a second and find your journal or find your phone so that you can take some notes or give yourself a voicemail or whatever, so you can remember what led you to the place where it's like the only thing that's going to help is food.
Right. But then,
then you have it.
Yes. And then it's that sugar high,
Yes.
that sugar high that
Dopamine. Get that little dopamine rush, and woo!
Yeah,
That only lasts for so long, right?
You being a doctor, all about that chemistry. But, I have found this by trial and error, because I would never, ever admit, especially to my husband, that it works. He's always like, come on, we need to exercise. We need to exercise more. We need to walk the 2-mile neighborhood filled with hills. We need to do this. And I'm like, I would rather eat spiders than do that. However, the benefits of doing it are amazing. And yeah, you replicate that rush. It might not be as fast, but after you do it, you've got that same high going on for a long time.
That's so interesting. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, is Rob Dial, and he was actually talking about that this morning, about how we can actually trick our brain into creating dopamine for us, to give us that momentary pleasure high, just by remembering what we're doing as we're doing the things that we don't really want to do, right? Like you finally get up and you go to the gym, and instead of saying, oh, I'm at the gym, you go, I'm at the gym. I made it to the gym. And like, give yourself you got there after your first reps, like, or your first set of something, like, I did it after your first quarter of a mile. I walked that quarter of a mile. It's so good, right? And just doing those things. And actually, right now, I feel better just saying all that. Like you can trick your brain into feeling better about yourself and about your life just by celebrating those tiny little wins along the way.
Yeah.
It's a hack. It's a biohack. It's a neuro hack.
I did not know that, but that makes sense because I was a high school cheerleader and I always thought, what do you need cheerleaders for? But you do need cheerleaders and you need to be your own cheerleader. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yes.
And so many people, don't have any cheerleaders. I hate to say that, but sometimes when you tell people, like, I like to encourage people, I like to inspire people, they look at you and go, oh, that's so nice. That's not like being a corporate CEO, accountant, dealing with numbers. So, oh, that's so nice. But think about what we really need. Like you just said, we need to hear, because it's okay. Any kind of faith comes by hearing. That's what the Bible says. You can have faith in whatever you want to have faith in, but you hear it. And then it goes into your brain, and then eventually it gets down into your psyche. So it's
Ooh,
very,
excuse
very
me.
to have cheerleaders, very important.
Hang on. I am so sorry. No idea. Well, it was my ex-husband, but I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry too.
Oh no, he's a friend of mine. We're good. Yeah. I don't know why he was calling, but
My door that says podcast in session. So hopefully, you know, hopefully that'll hold. But
actually never happened before. So
I think it's important that find people that will encourage you,
oh my
whatever,
gosh, that's so important.
find your people,
It's
and
so important.
too. It could just be a very small group of people that are for you and that are willing to support you no matter what, It's really
Yeah, I actually, speaking of my ex-husband, he's one of my people.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's one of my people. He's one of my cheerleaders. He's been there. We've co-parented now for 10 years and we are good friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's remarried and has that, but we are good friends in all of that. And it is important to know who's on your side,
Yeah.
right? Not everybody's on your side.
It's true. It takes a little discernment to get to that place, but yeah. Yeah.
And I do think that the CEOs and the people who think they're all self-important and that the encouraging that we do as for a living, like I think if they really stop and think about it, they have those people in their life too.
Probably. Yeah. Most
They just
likely.
don't acknowledge, maybe you all out there haven't really acknowledged the people who encourage you on the regular, right? Like the people that are there in your corner when things don't always go so well, or who are there cheering you on when things are going well and they're
Yeah.
not trying to tug you back down, right? Those are the people that keep cheering you on when things are going well.
Yeah. And especially I found with counseling, uh people need support, and we are often as humans very unwilling to trust, and rightfully so, because of what you just said. It's hard to know who's really in your camp, and there's nothing wrong with finding out. I want to say that, like you were talking about process, there's nothing wrong with finding out who's in your camp. So you maybe try going to this counselor, or you maybe share a little bit with person X or B, and you find out that it kind of falls flat.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you're going around needy. I think people are afraid to present as needy. But I think over time, if you purposely seek to see who they are, they'll emerge, And sometimes when you're not even looking for it, they come out, and you'll get an email, or you'll get a phone call, you get a text, that's one of those cheerleading moments, hey, you did great. And you say, wow, I didn't expect that.
Yeah,
So
I prayed for a mentor for a really long time, and this woman just popped into my life when I needed her. And we don't see each other very often, unfortunately, but I know that she's right there. Like
yeah.
she's in my pocket. and I adore her. We just hit it off. We spent 3 or 4 hours on our first coffee. Like we were going to spend for an hour.
Yeah.
This is one of those moments. I think that's so important. And to your point about people not walking around needy, I do think that there's an awful lot of women who do walk around as victims to their circumstances. Not just women, men too. But I think it's sad that they don't take their life, and they don't see that this could be a blessing in all of that,
I've
in
heard,
what's happened to
yeah,
them.
I agree with you. I've heard many people give 20 reasons why they can't change. I can't change because 1, 2, 3, all the way to 20.
Yep.
And they've convinced themselves that these 20 factors are the reason, when actually they probably have very little to do with it, but it becomes a mindset. And
Yep.
that's
It does. It's a habit.
yeah, mindsets, it's what we perceive, it's what we think about the situation. And it's important to sit down if you're stuck and start unpacking that.
Oh, I think that's so important. And that goes right to your pastoral counseling, right? Like my question to some who are ready, is like, when are you going to be grateful for the things that have happened to you? When
Yeah.
you like, what wouldn't have happened if you hadn't, we'll pull divorce, because this is actually part of my story. Like, I was my divorce was just final, and I had gotten an invitation to speak, and I'm sitting in the Dominican Republic, okay, on a beach at a beautiful resort, whining about my divorce.
Okay.
And somebody, yeah, right? Like, let's put this in perspective, right? And the person that I was talking to looked at me and said to me, "When are you going to be grateful for your divorce?"
That's a tough one though.
And I like almost fell off the log that I was sitting on.
Yeah, I would have
And I was like,
said,
"Whew."
what are you talking about?
And it took me a little bit of time, but then I realized, like, wait a minute. I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be in the DR for sure. I wouldn't be doing any public speaking, which is something that I absolutely love to do. I wouldn't be here to encourage these other doctors in their practice. I wouldn't be like all the things just in that moment, let alone the rest of my life.
Okay, yeah.
So it was an absolute perspective shift to find that gratitude.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. And yeah, God can make lemonade out of lemons, and you think one way, but actually, there's so much more. Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's kind
tell me how you help people get unstuck. Like, that's a great topic.
well, I do remember in the counseling that there are, methodologies and I don't want to get into all that, but
Mhm.
I think that building trust between the person who's sharing with you and the person who's listening is very important, that they have to like you, trust you, and believe that confidentiality that they can share with you, that it's not going
Oh,
anywhere.
so
That's
important.
huge. Yeah, because nobody wants their business shared unless they personally are telling it. Once you establish a rapport based on whatever your client feels is important to them. I mean, people can be very different. Some people are very impressed with credentials. Some people are more drawn toward, personality. It can vary, but whatever it is, I think you have to establish that. And then once that's been established, and it goes two ways, you decide you're going to work together. There's some people that I knew I wasn't going to work with. I couldn't work with. I didn't have the expertise to go there with what they were struggling with.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's important.
And other people, I never worked with medications. Felt, you need a referral to somebody who can work with situations. But beyond that, if you come up with What is the issue? You know, and then you have to hone in on what is the main issue. There could be 10, you know, but you really can only tackle one thing at a time because, you know, you were talking about habits and we were talking about mindsets. You know, these are things that have to be unpacked. And you can't hit 10 at once. You've got to go for the root. What's the root? What is really going on here? And I remember doing marriage counseling in particular, and just finding out that even though the one party in the couple was generally right about things and sensible and great, great, you know, and was sort of the goody goody out of the two, whereas the other one was the not so much, you know, this one screws up, this one doesn't get it. The rigidity was actually on the part of that person who was always getting it right. And until the person who was always getting things right by the world's standards was willing to drop the rigidity and become more flexible, this relationship wasn't going to go anywhere because I'm the goodie and you're the baddie. And this is how they defined themselves. And baddie was never going to be able to get out of that role of baddie. And so, you know, you don't want a relationship with a goodie and a baddie. You want a relationship of mutual respect and affection. So that was like the first step. It's often very difficult to tell somebody that even though, yes, you're right, you're not right. Y'all ain't right. You know, on the heart level, you're not right. You know, on the world level, on the performance level, you are right as rain. And should this relationship be guided by things you know? Absolutely. Is your intuition great? Absolutely. But are you really opening yourself up, you know, in the heart realm to your partner who isn't getting it right? And then the answer is no. So, you know, that's just one example of having to unpack something that is the stumbling block to change. And it wasn't, well, I'm going to give you a list of things to do and he'll do that and she'll do that. And then everything will be great, because that really wasn't the crux of the issue. So anyway, working with our stuff requires that we kind of dig and get very honest with ourselves about.
Oh, that is so true. And I love what you were saying, because that's almost like, it's almost like the older brother in the prodigal son, right? Or the
Absolutely.
Pharisees who, like, I've always done it the right way, right?
Yes.
Right? The Pharisees who did it by the law, but
Yeah.
their heart in all of that is not right. Like, do you need to be right? Somebody said this to me a long time, right? Do you need to be right, or do you want the relationship?
Yes. Yes. And
Do you want respect?
but for Jesus, who
Oh, yeah.
hung out with Mary Magdalene, you know, and didn't care what they thought of him, and was truly the radical who showed us so many things about the heart. Yeah, absolutely. So that's
Yeah.
important when you're struggling with an issue, is to and if you want to change, you know, that's the other thing. If, you know, people don't want to change, they're not going to change, and there's no point in trying to make them because they don't want to.
It's
And that's,
true. I mean,
yeah.
that's just, yep. At some point, there has to be some acceptance
Mhm. Yeah.
about that person, and whether you can live with that or not, that's a, that's a separate decision. Speak into, we talked a little bit about, we touched on this when we spoke before, about fear and getting stuck. Because fear plays a big role in when people are stuck in, like, I'm afraid to move forward this way, or it's my pride, or I don't really want, the shame is keeping me here. I don't want to talk about what's happened. And so I'm just going to stay here in my comfort zone. Speak a little bit into that, because we had just sort of started to talk about that. And I think it's interesting and true, as I speak to people about changing their lifestyle, that they're afraid of what's going to happen on the other side, or They're afraid to talk about the shame that they feel around all the times that they failed in weight loss or failed in getting healthy or failed just in their life in general, and that's what's holding them back.
Well, um, the fear sometimes comes from a root of that's in the Bible is called fear of man. And
Mm.
you can be indoctrinated with that unknowingly on many levels. You may be afraid of the priest, you might be afraid of the pastor, you might be afraid of your father, you might be afraid of your teachers. You may be someone who just has operated out of fear because of abuse or who knows what, but that is something that needs to be addressed. That, fear of man is a snare, the word says, and it's because it keeps you in a corner. And you may be anticipating that, if I do this, because once it happened to me in fourth grade, I got in trouble. Then if I do it again, if I step out of my little box, somebody's going to come along and yell at me, or they're going to do this or that. And, a strong-willed child will not have a problem crossing a boundary, but someone who isn't strong-willed might. So you're not willing to cross the boundary, and you have to be encouraged that all the fears you have and all the things that you think could happen absolutely might not happen. Or you have to conversely say, well, what if they did? What would I do? And
Yeah.
you have to
Worst
ask,
case scenario.
yeah, would it really be the end of the world? Think about it. Would it be the end of the world? Or do you just think it would be the end of the world?
We tell ourselves so many stories.
We do. We do.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die if this happens. Probably not.
Yeah, or
It's probably not.
no one will talk to me if I, okay, unless you're really being horrible and uncouth and unethical, that's probably not true, because how many times do people say things and maybe people stop and look at you and think, but life goes on, the conversation goes on. And the other thing is that if we realize that this is a little harsh, but we're not as important as we think we are. Okay.
Woo.
It's like, oh my God, if I did that, then well, let me just say that everyone is probably not thinking about you. And you just think they are. And that's a hard one too, because they're not all thinking about you. They're thinking about what they have to make for dinner tonight, honestly.
Or they're thinking the same thing that you're thinking. What is everybody thinking about me?
Right.
Right. But they're not focused on you. they're
Right.
not
They
focused on they're not
wonder,
focused on me when I'm afraid in those moments
yeah. And then,
at
some of
all.
it, I think, is coming out of traditions, well, so and so before me and my family, my mom, my dad, my cousin, this one, they always lived this way. We always lived here. We always did this. We never did anything different. And you think to yourself, well, maybe it's time that you thought, if I broke out of the mold, would it help me? And people need to be engaged that way. They need to be challenged a little bit.
Really changing the legacy for their family,
Yeah. And all right, so
breaking the chains.
I'll give you a personal story. I have struggled with weight since I was 11. As soon as I
I hear
started
you.
puberty, I looked in the mirror and said to my mother, I didn't want to look like this. I wanted to look like somebody else in my family. And my poor mom said, well, I guess you inherited my body shape. And I said to her, well, I didn't want it, because I was a skinny kid. And then all of a sudden comes puberty and I'm not a skinny kid. Well, I managed to be a skinny kid by not eating in high school and
Mm,
college, just not eating. But after having my fourth child, that translated into a thyroid that didn't work anymore because I hadn't been eating properly. I mean, I've been eating good foods, but not much of it. And so there's only so long your body can do that. And then after a while, on come the pounds, and then when premenopause hits, on come more pounds, to where I'm 50 pounds overweight. in my
Mm.
50s. And you talked about shame, and I really could feel, not only could I feel a difference in the way I was perceived socially, because I was heavy,
Ooh.
which I've always been aware that people who are heavy are perceived as sloppy, lazy, slovenly, not together. But now I could really feel that. And that brought shame that, okay, so no matter what diet I went on, no matter what I did, nothing changed. And this went on for many, many years, where I just carried this load of fat around. And eventually I just gave up. And I said, you know what? I could stay on a diet for 52 weeks to lose a pound a week. And there's no way I'm going to be compliant for 52 weeks.
Mm.
So who cares? I'm just like Fat Kim. Anyway, to date now, I have taken off 40 pounds. And I did it with a particular program. I really don't want to mention it, but I will say that there was a program out there that worked for my situation, which had to do with body chemistry, and it
Yep.
had to do with carbohydrate metabolic dysfunction. But
Mm.
I finally found a place where they were willing to dive into all the insulin, carb, et cetera, et cetera. The macros I'm on now have absolutely nothing to do with what the FDA or USDA or anybody would have ever taught anybody how to eat. They are so inverse to what I was taught that it's crazy. But I have been assured that there is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. I've been
It's true.
told there's essential fatty acids and essential amino acids, and you get them from your foods. But when it comes to essential carbohydrates, the human body can live completely void of them and function just fine. So
Most
this
of us.
I have learned, and just getting into this new, I guess, revelation for me, maybe it's not new, has been amazing. It's been amazing. So it's never too late to keep trying. But you talked about fear and shame. Yeah, I mean, I was just ashamed of how I looked and felt. It's not that I didn't want to change. I just got tired of looking for the answer.
It's
And
so exhausting. I know for my
yeah,
clients, it's so exhausting. And for myself, I've had to change some things over the years. And y'all who listen on a regular basis know a little bit of my story too. But absolutely, I'm in that space right now where I I was pretty sick at the beginning of the year, and I had COVID, and it really turned me upside down, mostly because of my stress level on top of, yeah, it was COVID on top of my stress level. I thought I was going to be fine, but my immune system, with the amount of stress that I have, just couldn't do it. Right. So I was sick for quite some time. And, I gained 2 or 3 pounds, not a lot, but it's definitely different coming out of it, and how I need to feed my body now as I
yeah,
continue to recover. Right.
yeah,
Continue to recover.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just different. I can feel it, and I've had to rework my macros for what works for me. And I want to say something to everybody out there. We all have to find what works for us, because your plan works great for you. My plan works great for me. Part of what you and I both do is figure out what plan is going to work for each one of you who's out there listening right now. That's what we do. I do it through blood work. Dr. Grom does it probably a different way, but those are everybody is genetically different, and we all have to figure out what's going to work for us and then stick to it. But you are correct. Carbohydrates are necessary for the brain to function, but they are not necessary for us to consume. We have different biochemical processes in our bodies that allow us to convert fat into carbohydrates and energy for our brain. We can break down proteins if we're not breaking down our muscle tissue, which keeps us young. Um, um, so that's amazing. I love your story. I love your story, and I love that. Frankly, that what you said, you gave up. You were Fat Kim. That was it. Because so many of everybody who's listening, right? Like, you get that. People get that. Like, I forget it. I just give up. I can't go anymore. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. There's a lot of new things on the market as well that are very helpful. I have a few friends that, as we've aged together, dear friends that have flipped into type 2, and they have
Yes, so many.
new peptide therapies that are really helping to reverse that. So I'm just thankful, if something is not harmful and it's not, a dirty pharmaceutical, and yet it's helping us to get back into the healthier zone. I think I like to weigh it on a pendulum scale and say, well, is this going to do more harm or is it going to do more good? And, some of the things that are available now seem, if they're going to get the pounds off, they're going to reverse the type 2, get the A1C down. Do it, do it. Don't be afraid. Check it out. See if it's for you.
Yeah, type 2 is 100% preventable. And if you're already there, it is 100% reversible. And that
Yes.
is not me talking. Those are experts talking. That's my functional medicine background talking. That's your nutrition background talking. It is reversible. Does
Yes.
it take some work? Oh, heck yeah. It's a lot of work to get it to turn. It's like turning the Titanic, right? We got to turn that whole insulin bus around, and we got to get your cells much more sensitive to the insulin that you're making. And there's a whole process that your body has to go through to make that happen.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it
I
can
think
be done. We
it
all
is,
have the machinery.
yes. Yeah. I think a lot of it's what, uh, you know, I want to say to a point, people have been victimized by processed foods because
Absolutely.
my grandparents, I looked at reels of them when they were in their 30s, they were string beans. Well, they didn't have shelves of what we have now. They
Nope.
absolutely had to have a protein and a vegetable and maybe some fruit. But in order for those cakes and pies and things to be made back in the day on the farm, it took flour, it took work. And the mamas who were plopping out these babies and the daddies working on the farm, they weren't going to sit around and make cake all day. They were going to do what they had to do. And maybe on Sunday, you got a little bit of something sugary or floury. But now, I mean, when I went to school back in the day, um, we
It
had for
wasn't that long ago, y'all. It was like the 80s. Come on.
yeah, Captain Crunch for breakfast, Fruit Loops. These were our
Yeah.
choices. Frosted Flakes, Tony the Tiger. I remember all this. We'd sugar up with milk, go to school. You open up your lunchbox, you'd get peanut butter and jelly, more sugar, and then you'd get ring dings or ho-hos or something like that. Man, we were flying all day long. And then you come home, you have a snack, more cookies, maybe you had to eat an apple, and then you had to sit down and eat what? Meat and vegetables. Ugh.
Or pasta.
Wanted that, you know? So insulin resistance. Am I surprised looking back at what I put in myself as a child? Hey, my parents were victims of advertising on the TV that had rabbit ears and 4 channels. They talked about all this stuff that you could feed your kids, and nobody ever said it was going to be bad.
And it was easy. No, it
Yeah.
was just easy. And all the moms were going back to work, and all the ladies were ladies. We wanted to go to work, but this is the outcome of some of that, right? We were looking for something easy to feed our kids, and it's
Yeah. So
yeah,
now we have to reverse this. It's almost like the sugar curse. We have to reverse it. And
we
it does.
absolutely do.
It's hard. It takes work.
And we keep dancing around, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, and I'm probably going to offend some of you out there, so bring it on. But the obesity epidemic is the result. And if you out there, if y'all don't know, 70% of Americans are overweight and obese. And this is not me talking, this is not me judging. This is me just letting you know, hey, this is that over half, 70%, the majority of Americans are overweight and obese. And this is crippling our healthcare system because our healthcare system is not designed to take care of this lifestyle problem, because that's what it is. It's a
Yeah.
lifestyle issue. And it started back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. We can probably even take it back into the 50s with TV dinners when all those started. Like, as people came off the farms and everything got more industrialized, so did we.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, we are a product of everything that we have decided we needed and seen on TV and been marketed and just coming, you got to go back to if you didn't have all that, and I know a lot of people are going this way, thinking this way, what would I eat? Well, if I didn't have all that and I had a chicken or a cow, or the ability to purchase something grass-fed and organic, and I had my own garden, and I didn't have, I wasn't sitting in my garage kneading flour and
You mean grinding flour?
finding it right, and
Yeah,
then
right.
making it into things like pies, or growing rice in my little rice paddy. Would I be able to eat those things? Well, the answer really is no, I wouldn't. Maybe I would have some cornmeal or something, but yes. So you see how all of the abundance that we have has led to an abundance of us, right?
Yes, for sure. And it's one of my mentors, Dr. Jeffrey Bland, who founded the Institute of Functional Medicine, always said this is overconsumptive. Now, this was 25 years ago, overconsumptive malnutrition, because that's what we have, right? We're not getting any nutrients from our food right now. If you're eating a lot of ultra processed foods, that come out of a box or a bag or something plastic, like these are ultra processed foods. And we're over consuming them, but we're malnourished at the same time, right? Like, and the bigger picture is that half of the world is dying of starvation, and
Mm-hmm.
the other half of our world is dying of obesity.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's a,
It breaks my heart.
yeah. Yeah.
It breaks my heart.
Yeah. When you put it that way, and you're right. Yeah. It's, mm, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to let all that sink into you all right now. Take a deep breath, and remember that we just talked about that there are ways out of all this.
Yes.
And you have that ultimate control. You can use your 20 excuses, right? Right, Dr. Grom, like they can use their 20 excuses for why they can't change. Or they can say, you know what? I can stop being right. I can put my pride aside. I can walk through the shame, which is messy to start unpacking all that, right? I had a mentor once say you have to walk through the tunnel of pain. It can be the tunnel of shame, it can be the tunnel of pain, it can be whatever ugly tunnel, but we all have to go through the tunnel. And I've said this before and you're probably gonna laugh. But my tunnel is like the tunnel that goes under your driveway, like the drainage ditch, but there's like a pipe, right? The drainage pipe that's under your driveway. If you, particularly if you live out in the country, right? Like what is in that thing? Like there are snakes and bugs and gunk and muck. And if you really live in the country, there's probably some cow dung, like who knows what's in there. And you're gonna have to get on your hands and knees or on your belly, and you're
Mhm.
gonna have to get messy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're gonna come out the other side and you can take a shower and it'll all get cleaned up.
Yeah. 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 I know. I remember there was a year or two where my husband and I, we were just thrilled with the fact that we considered ourselves to be wine aficionados, right?
Oh,
So
I
we
love that.
drank red wine, white wine. Well, you know what? There's something, I think it's called DOA or DAO. There's something in your gut that you need to break down histamines. And doing that kind of reduces your levels, which I didn't know.
Can.
But now I have lots of histamine issues, and I am no longer a wine aficionado because, there's
It took
things
its toll.
you do in moderation, and then there's things that you do in not moderation. And really what I learned about that is everything in moderation, because the human body is also really not designed for excessiveness in any area. It's
It is
just not,
not.
no matter what the commercials say, no matter how cool you think it is to go to California and go run around and go wine tasting, which we did all that, your body doesn't think it's so cool, you know?
Right. And it's okay to do that for a week, but
Right.
not for months on end and weeks on end and days on end, right? Like it's okay. You go out there, enjoy yourself, have fun. It's a vacation. And when you come back,
Right.
you got to jump back on whatever that healthy lifestyle is.
Absolutely. You do not let each place you visited ship you a bottle. You know, you say, I'm not joining the wine club,
You don't get to take it with you. You got to leave it on vacation.
you know, and I have to say that having finally found something that works and going down 2 sizes has been exhilarating.
So
So
cool.
the rewards at the end of it have, I couldn't imagine. It was always like, I want to hit a lower number. I want to, this great big goal that seemed like impossible. And I never thought about, I know I'd heard about it. Oh, hang up that dress and picture yourself in it. But I was so, uh, let's see, so discouraged and
I was going to say, yeah.
never thought it would happen. So I never did it. But now that it's happening, I'll tell you what, I get up in the morning and look in the mirror and I'm skipping and I'm like, hey, you know what? It's never too late. Sure. Do I
And I
wish?
bet your husband, hello.
Well, and he's lost weight too. So the
Yeah,
two of us are, we're like, yippee, we're thinner, we're happier, we're more hyper. Now we have to go exercise more, we have to run around more, but so what? It's living. And it to me, it's just more than I could have hoped for.
and it's weight loss. Okay, to my audience, to y'all, this is weight loss over 50. It
Yes.
can happen. Menopause is not a death sentence. It is not doom and gloom and fat. It does not have to be that. Will you have to change some things? Yes. Will you have to find a new way to do things? And it's funny because you scroll on any social media and they all are like, you have to balance your hormones, you have to do these things. It does change things.
Mhm.
What we did in our 20s, 30s, and 40s is going to be different in our 50s and 60s and onward.
Yeah.
It has to be. Our
Yeah.
bodies are very, very different. We are not childbearing anymore. We get to be free of that now. And that doesn't mean that we just pack on the pounds and become, like, I don't know, Mrs. Claus. I don't know. I just don't think that has to be the definition when we think of a woman in her 60s, right? I'm going to be 59 this year. I don't look like that. I don't ever want to look like that. And
Yeah.
so I've shifted and changed and I'm fortunate like you to be in the industry, right? So we kind of know how things work, but that's y'all, this is what we do. We help you figure that out. So you
Yeah.
don't have to be that way.
Had a guy come by to deliver a piece of furniture, and I said, I don't know, he got asking questions about something. I said, well, how old do you really think I am? Well, he gave me a number 10 years younger, and I said, oh, you're just wonderful. You're just such a sweet young man. I said, really? He said, really. So hey, the losing weight has benefits in that you also start looking younger, right?
Yeah, your skin gets better, like all of the things, right? Everything gets better. Now, I love my teenagers. My son's friends are, oh, there's no way. You definitely look 45, was what I got the other night. I'm like, heck yeah. Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
But you talked about getting things in balance, and I do want to say that when I lived in another state, I had a farm, and there's something in the hay that grew. We had horses and things like that called aspergilli mold, and I had become infected with that. It blew in a window. It landed behind my nightstands where the HVAC system was and blew through my entire HVAC system. So I thought that, I had become an asthmatic and et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, I did have to go for functional medicine help. And I found out that when you have toxicity on the cellular level, they were looking at a certain something that your cells give off, and they were measuring it and saying that it had something to do with paradoxase, that when this paradoxase level changes, that means that your cells are less toxic. And this functional practitioner assured me that when those levels normalized and I was able to detox, and now I had to do some detoxing.
Yeah, you have to do some work.
It's mold, but my body also was responding weight-wise to having a mold toxicity issue, which, just trying to go on standard weight loss programs, that was another reason I was stuck and I didn't know it. So what happened was I found a functional medicine practitioner who was able to do the deep dive on the cellular level with the blood, as you mentioned, and say, hey, let's look at what's going on the cellular level, because your body is going to handle the toxicity by sticking it into fat cells, because it can't run through your bloodstream.
Nope, we cannot.
So until we reduce the toxicity, those fat cells, your body is not going to want to give up any of those fat cells, because this is actually holding you. I thought, well, that was fascinating.
It
That
is
was
fascinating.
amazing. But lo and behold, once, I had accomplished a 10-pound weight loss just doing that, before I went on this other type of program. So that's another thing to consider. People beat themselves up and say, well, so and so went on Weight Watchers and they lost 2 pounds a week, and I gained weight, and da da da. Like, it's worth it to take the deep dive and see the functional doctor and find out, like, what's really going on the cellular level with me. I had to do it.
Thanks for the plug, Kim.
Well, no, I'm just saying I had to do it. If I hadn't taken that step.
It's true. I think that is for at least for the clients that I have, right? Like, that's the first place that we start. Like, what is your body missing? What is your body creating? What are you not absorbing, right? Like, the whole thing starts with gut first. And then once your gut is in a good place, then we can detox you, because we're not going to be throwing toxins into a leaky gut where things just get reabsorbed. And so there are steps that have to be taken. And it's not just what's the quick and easy detox that I can do over the weekend. It's not that simple. It can take, 3 to 6 months for things to sort of sift their way out of our bodies. It just takes time, just like it's taken me some time to move through a viral infection. Okay, it's taken time.
Well, at the end, I would say it's definitely worth it.
It's so worth it. It's worth taking the time. Not only that, but back to the kind of, we're going to make a full circle here, back to the beginning of what we first started talking about. Like, God has us go through these things for a reason. I knew that I was moving way too fast in my life back in the fall. And he made me slow down. I had a little case of the shingles, and I'm like, and I am so fortunate.
Yeah.
I probably need to slow down.
Yeah.
Like, in the back of my mind, but I didn't listen. Got a little cold around Thanksgiving, which is kind of a typical time for me. Kind of didn't listen. And then, okay, you don't want to hear me? Guess what? You're going to be in bed for 3 weeks with COVID. Okay. If you don't want to slow down, we're going to make you stop.
Yeah.
And I wasn't completely in bed, but
I can relate. Yeah. And you're right. You end up in places you didn't always want to be, because we're not invincible. We're just mortals. We're not invincible. Yeah. We can't do it. We really can't.
No, we cannot. So, Dr. Grom, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm so we're gonna have to do this again.
We can talk about Revelation Generation, and I just read that the Creation Festival, which was on for 44 years out in the middle of Pennsylvania, drew over 200,000 people every year.
Okay, we're gonna keep going. Tell me about that.
Well, that was a festival that we modeled Revelation Generation after, and they're actually closing. So I think it's the end of an era in that respect. But if I come on with you again, we could talk about the not-for-profit concert we did for the youth on our farm. That was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Oh my goodness. No, let's talk for just a couple minutes about that. That's amazing. Because I know you're in your bio, it said 35,000 people. I think that that's phenomenal. And I just heard, so I'm not sure that everything in what you were saying is completely done. I just heard from our pastor that there's a Christian university where they started a praise and worship time
Mhm.
that has just drawn literally probably hundreds of thousands now, but it just started just a little bit like a few weeks ago, months ago.
Asbury, Kentucky. Yeah, in Kentucky,
Yes.
Asbury University is a Christian university, and they have started a little revival on their campus. And no, it's definitely not over. But that was something that we had a heart for the youth in our community, in a rural community where kids seem to be a little too bored a lot. And then, of course, opportunistic drug dealers everywhere. And one year, several of the high school wrestlers died, like 3 young
Oh,
boys died on the team. And it was so heartbreaking to think that, after school hours, there wasn't enough to do. And there wasn't enough sense of value. Anyway, who knows why the addictions begin? I know that I personally think that people are preyed upon by those who are, the drug dealers. But anyway, it prompted us to begin the youth concert and invite everybody to come to the farm to hear people who live in this Nashville area, like Toby Mack and, oh gosh, a whole host of others came. But the kids came. They came year after year, and they came in bigger numbers. And it was amazing, the things that God did in their lives. There were people who decided that they wanted to keep their babies and came back and told us they were thankful that they did, that they had heard that there was another way around their situation and they had made a different choice. And a lot of beautiful, beautiful stories that happened within the young people, as a result of just opening up a 100-acre farm and putting 50 bands on it and saying, all right, come on, let's go. Here we are. Come on out. And they did. And they did.
oh,
Yeah, it was fun. So much.
I have tingles all the way down to my toes. Oh my gosh. That's phenomenal.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. We had a lot of wonderful people, spearheading committees. It got to the point where it was growing to where Department of Homeland Security was going to have to step in. And we decided at that point that
Wow.
we were going to go there because honestly, some of the things that crossed our mind was that there's a possibility, because it was labeled a Christian event, that we could have been targeted. We were very close to
Sure.
New York City and Philadelphia. And, as much as we loved the event, we just didn't want to take the risk of being branded and possibly having any of the young people being targeted. So,
That's so sad.
yeah,
And amazing because you changed so many lives. Like, what a legacy to leave behind, because each one of those people that you touched will touch their family moving forward. So,
yeah.
like, generations ahead will be touched by that.
Yeah, and hats off to all the great musicians who showed up to play, wonderful, wonderful people that you meet. Not everybody is sold out, humble, and altruistic. Some people are all about
Right.
that, but that's wherever you go. But boy, there were just some amazing artists out there that we got to meet and hear their testimonies. So that was great too.
Oh, oh my goodness. Yeah, we could definitely do a whole session on that. And I'm so glad that you said something. And you wrote a devotional book. And
I,
you wrote 2 kids books, and I know you have your devotional right there. So talk a
I
little bit
do.
about that. And you have another book coming out.
I
Y'all,
have
she is
another
such a wealth of information here.
Yeah, I love devotionals. I think it's important, because we're all busy. You spend a little time in the morning, you spend a little time in the evening with the Lord. And I find that a devotional helps me to focus. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
always dive into the book, but if I can dive into a story or a devotional that's going to point me to some scriptures, I really do enjoy that. And also something you can share. So yeah, that's
Show
fun.
us your book because I know it also encompasses your love of gardening.
Yes, this is called The
And
Promise Within the Garden. Yeah, The Promise Within.
yeah,
Uh,
love that.
it has a lot of beautiful illustrations that were taken from Old English gardens, which I have permission to obviously to reproduce. And yeah, so you can just see what's very interesting in this is that women are portrayed in these English scenes. We're not like this now, but they're in their lovely long dresses with their parasols and their animals, and they're just strolling through the gardens on these big estates. And I thought, my, how things have changed.
Oh yeah. Yeah, gone are those days. But also gone are the days that we are disrespected. And I mean, I know that that still happens, but like there's a little bit more respect for what we can bring to the party, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else, Doc, that you would like to speak to or speak about? And just
No, it's been wonderful. I just want to say for those listening, be encouraged, don't give up, find yourself the thing that works for you because it's out there. The Lord isn't, he didn't leave us with nothing, with no hope,
nope.
he has left us with hope and opportunity. So don't quit,
So true. And the Holy Spirit to guide us each and every day along our way if we will slow down and just listen, right?
Yeah, right.
Be still. Just be still.
Amen. Well,
Amen. Thank you so, so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And I love, love, love all of you. So hit like, hit subscribe, like tell your friends, share this all over social media so that we can get our message out. And I love, love, love you. Bye, y'all.
thank you. Bye-bye.